I have sat with people as they died. I need you to know that before I say anything else. This is not a teaching I pulled from a book or a theory I assembled from other people's ideas. I have been in the room. I have held the hand. I have watched the eyes change. I have felt the exact moment when something that was there a second ago was no longer there. And what I am about to tell you comes from those rooms, from those hands, from those final breaths that I witnessed not once, not twice, but many times across the years of my life. I am not a doctor. I am not a priest. I am not a scientist. I am a man who has been present at the border between this world and whatever comes next. And I have seen enough to tell you that the border is not what you were taught. It is not a wall. It is not a gate with a guard who checks your record. It is not a courtroom where your life is weighed on a scale. It is something else entirely. Something quieter. Something warmer. Something that every person I have ever watched cross seemed to recognize the moment they reached it. As if they had been there before. As if they were not arriving somewhere new, but returning somewhere old. And today I am going to tell you what I have seen, and what my grandmother taught me, and what I believe happens when the breathing stops, and the body goes still, and the person you love is no longer looking at you from behind those eyes. I want to start with what I have witnessed in the room, because the room is where the truth lives, not in theology, not in doctrine, in the room. The first thing I noticed, across every death I was present for, is that fear leaves before the body does. I need you to hear that clearly. The fear leaves first. I have watched people who were terrified of dying, people who spent months gripped by the terror of what was coming, and in the final hours, sometimes the final minutes, something changed. The fear dissolved, not gradually, suddenly, like a cloud burning off when the sun breaks through. One moment the person was afraid, the next moment they were calm. A calm that did not come from medication, a calm that did not come from resignation, a calm that came from somewhere else, from somewhere the rest of us in the room could not see. As if the dying person had received information that the living had not. As if someone or something had shown them what was coming, and the showing had removed the fear completely. I watched this happen with my uncle, a man who was terrified of death his entire life. He could not even discuss it. The word itself made him leave the room, and when his time came, in the last 2 days, his family expected agony. They expected panic. They expected the fear that had defined him to consume his final hours. And instead, he became the calmest person in the house. He smiled. He looked at things the rest of us couldn't see. He spoke to people who were not in the room. He said his mother's name. His mother had been dead for 30 years. He said it the way you say someone's name when they walk through the door and you are happy to see them, not with grief, with greeting. And then he looked at his wife and said, "It is beautiful." And those were his last words. It is beautiful. A man who spent 70 years afraid of death used his last breath to describe what he was seeing. And what he was seeing was beautiful. I have heard this from others who sit with the dying, the deathbed visions, the people who appear in the room that nobody else can see, the reaching out toward something, the looking upward with recognition, the sudden peace that replaces the fear in the final stretch. And the modern world dismisses all of this as hallucination, as the brain shutting down, as oxygen deprivation creating images that feel real but are not. And maybe that is true. I am not a scientist, and I will not pretend to be one. But I will tell you this. I have watched hallucinations in my life, and I have watched deathbed visions. and they are not the same thing. A hallucination confuses the person. A deathbed vision comforts them. A hallucination creates agitation. A deathbed vision creates peace. A hallucination makes no sense. A deathbed vision makes perfect sense to the person having it. They see specific people, people who have already died, and they are not afraid of them. They are relieved by them, as if the people who went ahead came back to walk them through. I do not know what science will eventually say about this, but I know what I saw. And what I saw was not a brain malfunctioning. What I saw was a person being met. I want to tell you about another moment I witnessed because it changed me permanently. A woman in our community was dying. She was 81. She had lived a hard life, not a dramatic life, a hard one. The kind of hard that comes from working every day for 60 years and raising children alone and burying a husband too young and carrying on because carrying on was the only option available. She was not a spiritual woman. She did not pray. She did not attend ceremonies. She lived practically, with her hands in the dirt and her eyes on the next task. And in her final hours, something happened that nobody in the room expected. She opened her eyes, wide, and she looked at the corner of the room, and her face transformed. Not slowly, instantly. The pain left. The exhaustion left. The hard lines that 60 years of labor had carved into her face softened. And she smiled. Not a polite smile. A child's smile. The smile of a person seeing something so wonderful that the body cannot contain the joy. And she reached out her hand toward the corner where there was nothing. Nothing we could see. And she said one word. Mama. She said it the way a 5-year-old says it, with complete trust, with complete relief, as if her mother, who had died 40 years earlier, had just walked into the room to take her hand. And the woman who had never prayed, who had never spoken about the afterlife, who had never expressed any belief in anything beyond the physical world, left this life reaching for her mother, with the face of a child who had just been found after being lost for 81 years. You can explain that with science if you want. I will not argue with you. But I was in that room, and what I felt in that room was not a chemical reaction. What I felt was reunion. Two people finding each other across a distance that should have been impossible. And the joy on that woman's face was not produced by a dying brain. It was produced by a living love. A love that had been waiting on the other side of a door that only opens once. And when it opened, the love came through. And it looked like a mother coming to get her daughter. And it was the most real thing I have ever witnessed. Before I share the next teaching, I need to tell you something. I am not going to be here forever. And most of what I know was never written anywhere. So I sat down and I wrote it. All of it. 20 teachings, 4 parts, in the order they were meant to be received. The ones about understanding what lies beyond. The ones about making peace with the journey every soul must take. The ones I have never said on camera. It is called The Native Way. And it costs less than one dinner you will not remember. Scan the code on your screen or look in the comments. But do not leave yet, because what I am about to share next is what my grandmother taught me about where the spirit goes, and it is the most comforting thing I have ever been told. My grandmother did not believe in death. I need to say that carefully because it sounds dramatic. She believed in the stopping of the body. She acknowledged that the body wears out, and the breathing stops, and the heart goes quiet. She witnessed it many times. But she did not call that death. She called it crossing, the way you cross a river. You are on one side, and then you are on the other side. The river is the moment of transition, the stopping of the breath, the closing of the eyes. That is the river, and the person crosses it. They do not end at it, they cross it. And on the other side, my grandmother said, everything you loved is waiting, not as a reward, not as a payment for being good, simply because love does not stop when the body stops. Love is not a product of the brain. Love is the thing the brain was built inside of, and when the brain stops, the love continues, because the love was never dependent on the brain. The brain was dependent on the love. She told me that the spirit, once it crosses, does not go far. This is important. She said the spirits of the people we love are not in some distant place. They are here, in this world, in this room, in the wind that touches your face, in the bird that appears at the window on the day you are thinking about them, in the dream where they look younger and healthier and happier than you ever saw them in life. They are not gone. They are just in a different room. Same house, different room. And the wall between the rooms is thin, thin enough that sometimes you can feel them through it. That chill you get when you are alone and suddenly you feel a presence. That is not your imagination. That is not a draft. That is someone you love standing on the other side of a very thin wall, trying to let you know they are still there. My grandmother said, the dead are not silent. We are just loud. We are so full of noise and worry and distraction that we cannot hear them. But in the quiet moments, in the still moments, in the moments between sleeping and waking when the mind is not guarding the door, that is when they get through. And if you have ever felt the presence of someone who has died, you know exactly what I am talking about. It is unmistakable. It is not memory. It is presence. Real, actual, warm presence, as if they sat down beside you. And if you have felt it, you do not need me to convince you. You already know. I want to tell you about a man I knew named Henry, whose wife passed after 53 years of marriage. Henry was destroyed, completely destroyed. He stopped eating, he stopped sleeping, he stopped caring about anything. He sat in the house they had shared and he waited to die because dying was the only way he could think of to see her again. And then something happened. 3 weeks after her death, Henry was sitting in the kitchen at 4 in the morning because he could not sleep. And he smelled her perfume. Not a memory of her perfume, the actual scent, in the kitchen, at 4 in the morning. A perfume she had not worn in 2 years because she had been too sick to dress properly. And Henry sat there in that kitchen and he breathed it in and he cried. Not from grief, from relief. Because the perfume was the answer to the only question he had been asking since she died. Are you still here? And the scent said, yes, I am still here. Different room, same house. And Henry told me that from that morning forward, the grief was still there, but the despair was gone. The grief was for himself, for his loneliness, for the body he could no longer touch. But the despair, the belief that she was gone forever, that was erased by a scent of perfume at 4 in the morning in an empty kitchen. The dead find ways. They always find ways. A song on the radio at the exact moment you need it. A butterfly that lands on your hand on the anniversary. A light that flickers when you say their name. The rational mind dismisses these things, but the heart knows. The heart always knows. I want to talk about what happens to the spirit itself, because my grandmother's teaching was specific about this. She said the spirit does not go to a place of judgment. The spirit goes to a place of understanding. It is shown its own life, not by a judge, not by an angry God with a ledger, by itself. The spirit sees its own life from the outside, every moment, every choice, every kindness and every cruelty, every time it gave love and every time it withheld love. And the seeing is not punishment, it is education. The Spirit sees where it grew and where it failed to grow, where it loved well and where it loved poorly. And the response to this seeing is not shame, it is compassion. Compassion for itself. Because from the outside, the Spirit can see what it could not see from the inside, that most of its failures were driven by fear, that most of its cruelties were driven by pain, that most of its mistakes were made by a being that was doing its best with limited information in a confusing world. And the compassion that the Spirit feels for itself in that moment is the closest thing to what the modern world calls heaven. Not a place of golden streets, a moment of total understanding. A moment where every question is answered, where every confusion clears, where the person you were and the person you wanted to be are finally seen as the same person, just at different stages of a journey that is not yet complete. I want to speak directly to the people who are afraid, because I know some of you are watching this with a tight chest and cold hands because this topic is the one you avoid above all others. You don't want to think about it. You don't want to discuss it. You change the channel when death appears on the screen. You avoid funerals. You avoid hospitals. You avoid the whole subject because the fear is so large and so consuming that even approaching it from a distance makes your body lock up. I want to tell you something that my grandmother told me when I was young and terrified of losing her. She said, "Dying is the easiest thing you will ever do." She said, "Living is the hard part. Living is where the struggle is. Living is where the confusion is. Living is where the pain is. Dying is where the pain stops. Dying is where the confusion clears. Dying is where the struggle ends and the understanding begins." She said, "You should not be afraid of dying. You should be afraid of not living. Because the only thing you can take with you when you cross the river is the life you lived. And if you lived it fully, if you loved fiercely and forgave generously, and showed up for the people who mattered and made at least one person's life better because you were in it, then the crossing will feel like coming home. Not like being taken from home, like arriving at home, the home you have been homesick for your entire life, without knowing what you were homesick for. I want to say something specific to the people who are afraid not of their own death, but of being alone when it happens, because that is a different fear, and it is very common. The fear of dying alone in a house with nobody holding your hand, nobody there to witness the crossing, nobody to say goodbye to. I want to tell you what my grandmother said about this fear. She said, "You will not be alone." She said it with such certainty that I asked her how she could know that, and she said, "Because the ones who already crossed will come for you. That is their job. That is what they do. They wait on the other side of the river for the people they love, and when the time comes, they cross back over and they walk you through. You may be alone in the room, but you will not be alone at the river. The room is where the living are. The river is where the dead are. And the dead, the ones who love you, would not let you cross alone any more than you would let a child cross a busy street alone. They will be there. Your mother, your father, your husband, your wife, your friend, the people who went ahead. They are already waiting, and they are better at this than you think, because they have done it before. They crossed, and somebody walked them through, and now it is their turn to walk you through. That is the system. That is how it works. Love walking love across the river. Generation after generation. Nobody crosses alone. The room might be empty, but the river is full. I want to tell you one last thing about my grandmother's death, because she lived what she taught. When her time came, she knew, not because the doctors told her, because she knew. the way you know when the season is about to change before the calendar confirms it. She called the family together. She sat in her chair by the window, and she said, "I am going to cross today." And the family, who had heard her teachings their whole lives, did not panic. They sat with her. They held her hands. They told her stories about her own life. They reminded her of things she had done that she had forgotten. They laughed. They cried. They made sure that the last sounds she heard were the voices of people who loved her and the laughter of a life well lived. And when the moment came, my grandmother closed her eyes the way you close them when you are tired, and the bed is warm, and the room is safe, and sleep is the easiest thing in the world. She did not gasp. She did not struggle. She did not resist. She closed her eyes, and she crossed. And the room, which should have felt empty, felt the opposite. It felt full, as if she had not left but expanded, as if she was no longer contained in the small body in the chair, but had filled the entire room. Every corner, every breath of air. She was everywhere. And I stood in that room and I felt her everywhere, and I understood, for the first time in my life, that she had been telling the truth. The dead do not leave. They outgrow the body, and what they become is too large to be contained in one room. So they become the room, and the house, and the wind outside the house, and the sky above the wind, and the silence inside the sky, and the love inside the silence. And that love, which was always too large for one body, is finally free to be as large as it was always meant to be. That is what happens when you die. You become what you always were, just larger, just freer, just finally uncontained. And the people you love will feel you, not every day, but on the days that matter, on the hard days, on the quiet days, on the days when they need you most. You will be there. Not in the room, as the room. Not in the wind, as the wind. Not in the silence, as the silence. That is where you are going. And it is not dark, and it is not cold, and it is not lonely. It is the largest, warmest, most connected thing you have ever been. And you will wonder, when you get there, why you were ever afraid of something so beautiful. If what you heard today stayed with you, the book is there. The Native Way, 20 teachings, 100 pages, written the way I would speak to you if we were sitting together. Scan the QR code on the screen with your phone or find the link in the comments. Read one chapter. Sit with it. Now I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, have you ever felt the presence of someone who passed? Tell me what it felt like. I read every comment. And if this is the kind of conversation you have been looking for, subscribe to this channel. We are not collecting viewers here. We are collecting people who remember. Come back next week. I am not done teaching yet.